everyone. Welcome back to the Grow RDH Podcast. This series we are highlighting for National Dental Hygiene Month is Behind the Mask series. And again, this Friday, we are highlighting another amazing hygienist who is doing a lot of good in the social media space and just promoting wellness. So I'm really excited to introduce her. Her name is Heather, and she goes by the social media handle, the Relaxed Hygienist. So we're going to chat with her today, and if you like this episode, share, like, subscribe, send to all your hygiene besties because this information is going to be great. So I'm going to introduce Heather, and then we're just going to get started with some questions. Heather has been practicing hygiene in both private and corporate dentistry for almost 16 years. Between her home state of Michigan and Denver, Colorado. Heather's passion to become a certified stress and burnout coach was inspired by her own burnout story, where she found deep healing through somatics, mindfulness practices, and yoga. So naturally, Heather is also a registered yoga teacher and a somatic practitioner. And through these modalities, she assists hygienists in taming their stress, recovering from burnout, and resetting their dysregulated nervous systems. In her free time, Heather enjoys spending time in the mountains, snowboarding and trail running, binging on the Great British Baking Show, reruns included, and listening to live music. So Heather, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to the podcast. We are so happy to have you. We're just going to go ahead and dive into the interview questions. And based on your introduction alone, I just want to give you this opportunity to sort of share your story, share your personal experience with burnout and why this topic is so passionate for you.
Yeah. So, my burnout journey really ultimately led to a complete lifestyle change of mine. I had been practicing dental hygiene for about 5 years back in Michigan, decided to finally move out west, and I practiced hygiene for maybe a couple more years downtown Denver. And I started, my 30th birthday was coming up, and I started to feel kind of funny. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I was becoming really irritable. I was becoming very short. I was not a pleasant person to be around. I was exhausted all the time. I can remember we were heading down south to do some rock climbing with a couple of my close friends, my sister-in-law and whatnot. And I was at a point where I couldn't take on anything more mentally, emotionally, physically. I didn't want to converse with people, even though I was an extreme extrovert at that point. And someone was invited to the birthday climbing trip that I didn't really know very well. And I remember just going off the handle and thinking, where is this coming from? This is not me. I don't usually care if more people are coming, like more the merrier. And around the same time, I just remember crying a lot and being so confused and so tired. I started doing art on the side. I had an art business and I was selling that, just trying to figure out how to get out of hygiene because I thought that hygiene was the problem. This was the problem. I needed to escape this. I have to change my entire career, which we know as hygienists is a very specialized career. We worked hard to get through school. We work hard on a daily basis with our patients. Hygiene school is not cheap. So just to pivot my career 7 years after I had just started, it was like, this is not ideal. This is not ideal. Fast forward a few years, I guess even just a couple years, my husband went back to school. I was dealing with some new health issues that we couldn't identify, which was kind of kicking off my 7-9 year health journey that leads to today. My husband also was dealing with some mental health issues. So when he finished school, he really struggled finding a job because mentally he was really struggling. He just couldn't really show up and be present for the interviews, which meant that all of the financial burden fell on me. A lot of my health issues were being linked to the stresses of dental hygiene. I couldn't really cut my hours. I'd already cut my hours from 4.5 days a week to 4 days a week, but really being the only person bringing in money, I couldn't cut my hours anymore, which of course exacerbated my health issues. Now, knowing what I know that my autoimmune issues were linked to the stresses of hygiene, closely linked to my burnout. A couple years ago was when really everything hit the fan. I had been practicing at an office that I could actually walk to. It was wonderful. I loved the practice. The patients were great. They were really long hours. It was being there at 6:30 in the morning to see the 7 a.m. patient. It was getting 15-minute lunch hours and then staying till 5:30, 5:45, 30, 45 minutes after the last patient left. It was a very demanding job. And I could feel the difference in my body continue to change until one morning I woke up, I hopped in the shower to get ready, and my heart started racing. My body felt really weird. I guess there's no other way to put it. It felt really different. And I had a panic attack. I didn't really know what was going on. My husband was there. He has a history of panic attacks as well. So he kind of walked me through it. That panic attack ultimately led to a full, what we call, mental health crisis now. I think 10 years ago it was being described as a mental breakdown. I spent the next month in bed. I rarely slept. When I did sleep, I had created a little bunker on the ground of pillows and blankets that felt the safest. I struggled to shower. I struggled to eat. Conversing with people was really difficult. When we have those times when we're talking to our patients, we're like, oh crap, what's that word? What's that word? That was me holding any type of conversation, even with those closest with me. I took about 6 months off of hygiene because I didn't have the mental capacity, like I said, to hold a conversation, let alone do really involved activities like scaling, like oral hygiene instructions, anything like that. That really opened my eyes to the power of burnout. Burnout wasn't a buzzword like it is now. It wasn't a buzzword 10 years ago. We weren't talking about burnout. It was something to be really ashamed about. I think there was a stigma around that. And because we weren't talking about it, especially in school, no one ever told me about burnout in school.
No, in fact, what they tell you is, oh, the average career for a hygienist is 10 years. We've had people tell our students that, and I'm like, that is so bleak. No, it's not. It doesn't have to be. So, yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be like that. Now we're talking about it and we know the signs and the symptoms that go along with burnout. Of course, hindsight's always 2020. So looking back, it was like, oh, okay, so I was in burnout for 7 years. What did you think was going to happen? But I didn't know what to look for and I didn't have anyone to turn to. The hygienists that I was friends with, they were also in burnout. So it's like the blind leading the blind. Where do you get the support? I was seeing a therapist for a little bit. We were doing some talk therapy. Then I switched to some EMDR therapy and we started processing some things, but it wasn't so related to the burnout. So I was getting some support, but not the support I needed. And I think there's something to be said about dental hygiene burnout too. It's very specific. And I've talked to several hygienists who are like, no one really understands how I feel or where I'm at except for another dental hygienist. When I hit burnout, the resources that I had to go to were continuing ed classes. Okay, I couldn't feed myself. There's certainly no way that I was going to be able to go out in public around a bunch of people to sit through a CE class talking about burnout. I also needed tangible tools at that point where I could lay in bed and work on my burnout recovery. And I didn't know those things. I didn't have those things available. So that really kind of pushed me in the direction of, I don't want another hygienist to go through what I did. It's
Yeah.
terrible. Being in burnout is terrible. And I didn't even know that a mental health crisis was at the end of the line of that. Had I known, I would have done something about it sooner.
Right.
But now that we've opened the conversation around burnout, especially in the dental hygiene field, I feel really confident that through different podcasts and different courses and just even social media and talking about it, we're able to reach a lot more hygienists to say, hey, this is what you're experiencing. Let's do something about it so you can get more than 7, 10, 12 years out of your career.
Right.
We went into hygiene for a reason. We're not trying to exit a decade later for most of us.
Yeah, I just, oh, thank you for saying that. To me, early exit from your career is not an answer for the majority of hygienists. And I think so many people are looking for like, how do I exit this career? And it's like, how do you advance your career, or how do you thrive in your career? This career you put so much time and education and money into. How can you thrive in that career? So I love that you're talking about that. I don't want to completely go on a tangent, but I want to echo what you said about CEs and burnout. My experience and my frustration is sometimes you hear the word burnout and it's so surface level. A lot of the recommendations that a lot of mainstream, widely known people are talking about is just basic self-care. And so sometimes that's frustrating to me because we can tout self-care all we want, but what does self-care look like? Because sometimes self-care isn't always like a bubble bath, or a lot of people are saying like a glass of wine, and I'm like, a glass of wine is a depressant. And that, to me, sometimes it's just so surface level or basic. What is your thoughts on some of the mainstream thoughts about self-care?
I'm in your boat, Katie. I'm in your boat. It does kind of rub me the wrong way when we talk about self-care. Of course, we all want like the feel-good self-care things, the
Yes.
bubble baths, the manicures, the pedicures, the massage, going shopping. Like you said, that glass of wine, that margarita, on a Friday. And those things are all wonderful and great, but are those things actually helping you to recover? Are they pushing the needle of recovery? Like you said, alcohol is a depressant. When we are in burnout, the last thing we need is to feel more depressed.
Yes, yes.
When I talk about self-care with burnout, now obviously I'm also, like you mentioned, a stress management coach and a somatic practitioner. When we talk about burnout has 5 specific stages. We have our honeymoon phase, then we have the onset of stress, and then we have chronic stress, and then we hit burnout, with the last stage of burnout being habitual burnout until we bottom out with a mental health crisis like I did. When we look at that hierarchy of how we move from the onset of stress to burnout, we have to start basically discharging stress from the body. So when we're holding on to these stress loops in our body, that is what brings us closer and closer to burnout. So when we're in burnout, yes, we can take our bubble bath, hot showers. Those have been proven techniques to help to decrease our levels of stress in the body. But how are we discharging the stress? So one thing that I like to do is different somatic exercises that actually release stress from the body. One of them is a muscle tension kind of relaxation technique where you move from your feet all the way up to the crown of your head, and you're squeezing different muscle groups for 5 to 10 seconds and then releasing. We've seen a lot of things on TikTok and Instagram about the vibration plates, the shake plates that you stand on. Okay, so when the body is shaking or bouncing, that is a great way to relieve stress. When we look at, say, like a herd of antelope in the wild, when they are grazing, they're nice and relaxed, they're kind of chilling, they're looking around, and then all of a sudden, oh, what? Predator. And they all stand still and they're on high alert. At that point, their bodies are pumping out blood to their major muscles that help them to escape that threat, the fight, flight, freeze state of the sympathetic nervous system. All right. Now, when the danger passes, okay, lion moves on, finds something else to do, no longer interested. You'll see a collective shake kind of move through the herd. This is their way of discharging the stress and bringing their bodies from a heightened arousal state back to a calm or rest and digest state of the parasympathetic nervous system. So as humans, we don't just shake off, a stressful situation. Oh, someone cut me off in traffic. You're not sitting there just, shaking in your seat. No, our bodies internalize it. So what do we need to do? We have to complete that stress loop. We have to complete that stress cycle. We have to discharge that stress. If we don't do that, again, it just accumulates in the body and brings us closer to burnout. So when I talk about self-care, it's not necessarily the wine, the bubble bath, those feel-good things. It's actually taking small, simple steps to actually take care of our bodies, to take care of our mental and emotional well-beings. And that starts at a very cellular level. Burnout recovery doesn't have to be hard, but you do have to know the different tools that you have available to help you start with that recovery and really give yourself the self-care that your body and your mind and your soul are actually craving. Yeah, I love a glass of red wine, but the next morning, that red wine didn't help me one bit.
Right. I love that example, especially like in the wild. I think, again, like you said, it's a cellular level type of thing where we're not even, maybe something that might feel good at the time isn't helping us internally, deal with some of the things that are going on inside. So I really like that example. So if we're talking to a hygienist that may be in the early sign, what are some early signs of burnout that we can maybe start to look for or recognize? And then how do they take some proactive steps to address it?
Yeah, sure. So let me just define the difference between chronic stress and burnout, because there is a difference. And I think it's important that we know the difference so we know what tools to grab out of our toolbox and use when we need them. So the biggest difference between the feelings of overwhelm with chronic stress is that burnout feels like complete depletion. I can give you a personal example. I've gotten out of burnout. I've recovered. I have my toolbox is chock full of different tools to use whenever I need them. But I am juggling a few different things. I work clinically 3 to 4 days a week. I work as a stress management and burnout coach and practitioner, the other 3-4 days a week. I rarely have days that I don't work just a little bit. I can feel that burnout creeping up. Recently, it was like, okay, I'm tired, I'm feeling overwhelmed. And then the next day, it flipped. And it was I can't get out of bed. I cannot eat. I don't even want to go for a walk, even though it's a beautiful 80-degree sunny day. Even going to the mountains doesn't feel fun. I'm just squeaking by. Burnout is a feeling of depletion, of deep depletion, that you have nothing else to give, that you cannot take one more step forward because you simply don't have the energy or the wherewithal to do that. So when we're looking at burnout, we're looking at, of course, irritability, the shortness, the easily agitated or aggravated, but we're also looking at your social life. It's one thing to be a natural introvert. It's another thing to all of a sudden go super, super inward. I don't want to talk to people. You're saying no to friends, to families. You've lost interest in the things that bring you joy, the hobbies that really ignite your fire. You don't have interest in those anymore. You just kind of want to hunker down. And for me, it's just be in a dark, quiet closet.
Yeah.
Other things when we talk about burnout in the workplace, apathy, cynicism, maybe you're seeing a decrease in your productivity. Maybe a lot of times you love being a team player because you like it when other people are team players, and all of a sudden You're not the first one there at the office. You're not setting up sterile. You're just clocking in, clocking out. We're seeing just kind of more of a disconnect from engaging with your profession, with dental hygiene. I think the ultimate sign of burnout is the depletion, the extreme low motivation for things, like I said, that ultimately have brought you joy and or even spurred you forward and motivated you in the past to get out of bed, to go to work, to engage with people and the things that you love.
Yeah. I sort of echo like the cynicism. So to me, when you were speaking, that was something that I really just like, so much of that I feel, especially in a more negative work environment, but even sometimes in the positive work environment, that cynicism is almost like a sarcastic, like defense mechanism where if I'm cynical, then I don't have to care, or I don't have to, you almost get into like a survival mode, right? I'm just here, I'm doing my best. And sometimes that can create a culture of cynicism where everybody's sort of, you kind of feed off of people's energy. So what advice would you have for somebody that's like, okay, I'm in that right now. How do I remove myself out of that?
Right. So let me just preface this with saying that when we look at burnout affects those who care. You can't burn out if you don't care.
If you don't care. Oh, I love that.
When we look at hygienists, we are a population of high achievers, detail-oriented people who care, not just about patients, but we care about perfection.
Yes.
So you can't burn out if you don't care, which puts
Yes.
us as caregivers in a really interesting predicament because we care so much about everything.
Yes.
About everything,
Yes.
our personal life, our professional lives, the relationships that we have, everything. So when you're in burnout and you're trying to get out of it, how do we stave off the cynicism? How do we stay engaged? We need to set boundaries. We need to set boundaries around ourselves. There is nothing wrong with saying no, and there's nothing wrong with prioritizing our well-being over anything. This is one thing that I didn't figure out until it was too late. For half my career, before I started the burnout journey, I put patients, I put the practice, I put everyone in front of my own well-being. I was dog sick, still going into work. I'm burnt out, I am still going into work. Why? Because ultimately, you are the only person who can get you out of burnout. You're the only person who can set boundaries and be stern with the external world so you can heal your internal world. And I think that we get so focused on performance and showing up and being reliable, and all of those things are so good. But what got you to burnout?
All
More
those
than
things.
likely, all of those things. So what do we have to do? We have to establish boundaries around these things. And I'm not saying don't be a team player. I'm not saying, yeah, just call in when you feel like it. No, we need to establish boundaries. And how do we establish boundaries? We have to open up a line of communication between our head and our heart. We have to open up that line of communication between our mind and our body. Because ultimately, if you don't know what's going on with your body and what it's saying to you, you're not going to know how to address problems. You're not going to know how to set boundaries. You're not going to know how to give yourself what you need to heal. So setting those boundaries, which boundary setting, not always the easiest thing to do. Not always the easiest thing to do. And in fact, I've talked to several of my friends who actually specifically see therapists for boundary setting. And some of them are hygienist friends. And I think that's great because especially I think in our generation, the millennial generation, boundaries, again, it wasn't a buzzword. It wasn't something that we were talking about and thinking about. And now it's like, oh yeah, we really need these to thrive, and not just thrive, but also to survive. You mentioned survival mode. That's what we're in burnout. So those boundaries can be saying no and kind of keeping things at arm's distance, or keeping people at arm's distance so we can heal. But also boundaries to me they almost represent internal goals for myself as well. Like, how am I nurturing what I need to do for myself? So maybe this isn't so much a boundary, but something that I try to do at the end of my day for 30 minutes is a self-care routine. And it's not always a feel-good self-care routine, like having my husband use a Theragun on my back. It's going to my yoga mat. It's doing some breath work. It's doing some somatic practices. It's connecting again back to myself, noticing where I'm at, and then saying, what do you need, honey? What do you need, body? I actually have communication allowed with myself in the morning, afternoon, and in the evening, just checking back in. That can be a boundary too. Hey, I have 30 minutes at the end of my day where I prioritize connecting back to myself, giving myself what I need, discharging stress, and then going through my evening routine and heading to bed. I think two is believing in ourselves and knowing our own self-worth. Hygienists are caregivers, and human giver syndrome is something that a lot of us experience, and I think that's very closely related to burnout. Human giver syndrome is basically burnout due to giving to others all the time and never recharging your own battery. Okay, if you can't take care of yourself, how are you supposed to take care of others? Ultimately, that's what we preach to our patients all day long. Brush and floss your teeth.
Yes.
Take care of yourself. Take care of your mouth. That way you can take care of your body. You can keep living out the lifestyle and the life that you've worked so hard to reach. Hygienists deserve that too.
Yes.
And that's something that I think really gets put on the back burner. We saw a ton of hygienists leave after the pandemic, during the pandemic.
Yes, that was well documented nationwide. I mean,
Yes.
a mass exit from the
Yes.
profession.
We're still feeling it. We're still
Mhm.
feeling the shortages, and schools are trying, to open programs and get more people involved in dental hygiene. But it also has a high burnout rate. If we're not prioritizing and advocating for our own well-being, and that I would consider a boundary, what are we doing? How can we even show up for our patients? Let alone, how do you show up for your loved ones, the people who you're closest to?
Yeah. We've experienced that in our state. I'm in South Dakota. Our South Dakota Dental Association has reached out to both South Dakota Dental Hygiene Association and the school that I work for, saying, we need more hygienists. What are we going to do? We can't, and it's brought up a lot of discussion, ADA, ADHA, and I can't remember if it might have even been like the CDC put out a national report. And one of the top 3 reasons of dental hygiene leaving the profession was toxic work environment. And that's a national study. That's a huge data point that I feel like everybody's sort of glossing over. It's like, and that sort of leads into my next question. How do dental practices, if dental practices and dentists specifically want to create an environment that allows hygienists to build boundaries, yet still be productive and be this really engaged member of their practice, how does the dental environment impact that? And how can they build or create an environment that's conducive to this?
That's a really good question, and it's a hard question to answer. I think that open lines of communication within the dental practice, within all team members, is really important. I think that also, in Colorado, hygienists are allowed to own their own practice. We don't have to work under the supervision of a dentist. Whether you work in a state that allows that, or you work in a state that doesn't, ultimately, I think most of us hygienists, we want to be seen as providers. as dental professionals. We don't want that hierarchy of the dentist is up here and then I'm underneath the dentist, and then the dental assistant is underneath me and the sterile tech is underneath them, and so forth. We all want to be on the same playing field. We all want to be on that same level. And I think that, practices who value and who give the hygienists, the assistants, the sterile techs autonomy and a say and a voice in treatment planning and taking care of patients, and playing important roles in the practice, and then also being called out and said, hey, I see you, I see how hard you work. We are a great team because of what you contribute. A lot of hygienists feel kind of slighted by the fact that, oh yeah, the dentist comes in and we've all had this, right? The dentist comes in, we've done the cleaning and we've said, you need a 43-46, you need a gingivitis cleaning. I'm getting generalized fours, we're getting bleeding, but we don't have radiographic bone loss. And the dentist comes in and says, looks great, I will see you in 6 months. And you're like,
yes,
dude, are you kidding me? First of all, you didn't look at the perio chart. Second of all, you didn't get out the perio probe. Third of all, you've talked to them for 5 minutes. I've spent 45 minutes with them. And this is a treatment plan. Like, we've talked about this. I've shown them charts and graphs and whatever. That hurts. That is a kick in the stomach.
It's direct disrespect. In my view, it shows in front of the patient. It's a level of disrespect that it doesn't allow us to voice our concerns or act as a provider would, right? This is what I've done. This is what I've found. And it's just disregarding that essentially.
Yes. I've had the pleasure of working with wonderful dentists, whether it was in corporate or private, who have, and this was in Michigan where you can't own your own practice either. And all of those dentists have thanked me after coming in for an exam. Those dentists have actually thanked me at the end of the day. My first employer, every day. Thanks, Heather. Thanks for a great day. You did great. I'll see you tomorrow. Little acts of kindness, little acts of saying, I see you. I see what you bring to my practice. I see what you do for my patients. Thank you. Those little acts of kindness and being called out for working hard make a huge difference. And I think too, it instills confidence in hygienists. Oh, I do know what I'm doing, especially new grads, right?
Yes.
A little bit less seasoned. It just instills the feelings of appreciation and value. I think that when it comes to finding your fit, I think that's the hardest thing, right? You interview, oh, that's great. And then the honeymoon phase wears off after about 3 months. And you're like, oh, I'm starting to see what's going on and whatnot. And a lot of hygienists, I think, are stuck in a position where either it's their location or job availability or hours where they don't have the option to leave those offices. And that's a really hard situation to be in. Some hygienists don't feel comfortable in temping, and I get that. I totally respect that. And there aren't always jobs available to temp, and it's not as reliable.
Right.
With people canceling last minute and whatnot on you. When it comes to those situations, I think that, it's really important to ask yourself too, yes, offices should be creating healthy environments for us to work in, especially if they want us to stay.
Well, exactly. And that's the issue is that's the, the national outcry for more hygienists. And I just envision, because I also have had some great dentists that I've been working under the supervision of that do foster an environment of autonomy. And to bring this full circle and going back to setting boundaries, it's way easier to voice an opinion or voice a concern to set a boundary when you feel autonomy, when you feel safe. It's just like same thing like with children and kind of like a parenting aspect. When they feel safe in their environment, they're free to voice concerns or voice opinions to set boundaries. So if you feel safe enough to set a boundary, what a amazing work experience that you can set a boundary and you can come forward saying that and feel completely safe in your job.
Yes. Safety. When we do feel unsafe, what does that do? It spikes our anxiety. You're not able to think clearly. You start dreading your workday. And it's just this whole cascade of just not feeling safe, not being able to set boundaries. Okay, now I feel worthless. I don't have any say in this treatment plan. Why am I even here? All these things just snowball on themselves.
And then going into that chronic stress that you were referring to, how much of that adds into that?
Right. When I've talked to a handful of hygienists recently that have come to me talking about anxiety in the morning. There are a lot of things that can go wrong in your day. Yesterday, every patient of mine showed up 10 minutes late.
You're like, great.
Excellent. Treatment plans changing, or, I think too, hygienists, we tend to push on the gas hard all the time. And we work through our lunches. We don't get time. Stephanie Batch, she talks a lot about ergonomics, and she talks about taking micro breaks for stretching. We know we're supposed to do it, but we don't do it. So that tunes our body into a state of, oh, so you don't give me what I want. Not just what I want, what I need. For instance, dehydration. What does dehydration do? Yeah, it makes us thirsty. It makes our mouth dry, but it also throws our body into a survival state. Okay. Cortisol levels spike. Cortisol is a major stress hormone. Okay. Now we're anxious and dehydrated. Our bodies get used to the way we treat them. It's just like your friend or your loved one gets used to how you treat them. If you treat them like crap, how do you think they're going to respond? We create these different pathways in our bodies as well as our brains that kind of attune us to what to expect. If we're expecting to walk into an unsafe environment where we can't set boundaries and those boundaries are always being pushed, of course we're going to have anxiety. Of course we're not going to want to be there. Of course we're not going to feel respected or valued.
Yeah. Yep. So to sort of wrap this up and sort of bring it full circle, any just little pieces of advice that you can give to hygienists? They already feel overwhelmed. Maybe now that they've heard a little bit more about chronic stress versus burnout, they feel like they're on the brink. Little pieces of advice that you can give to sort of reclaim their passion for the profession and just sort of, again, going into survival mode. How do we get out of that?
Right. Ultimately, I think it's, first of all, you're not alone. You are so not alone in this struggle. There are so many other hygienists who are in the exact same boat you are in. There's no reason to be ashamed. It's because you care. It's because you cared a little bit too much, but now it's your turn to take care of you and to care mostly about you. And that starts with a lot of self-acceptance and a lot of grace. There's nothing wrong with you. You just care, and there's nothing wrong with that. But now we're focusing on you. So let's start building your toolbox. What things can you do from the comfort of your bed for 5 minutes right before you fall asleep that help you to discharge stress, that help you to reconnect to your body, that help you to relax and train your body to know that it doesn't have to be in this heightened state of arousal all the time. It doesn't have to be depleted. You are there to take care of it. You are there to take care of you. Again, it's just like a relationship with anyone else. You have to establish that trust. When you establish that trust within yourself that you actually show up for you when you need to, that is where the healing really, really starts. I think too, like we talked about boundaries, and I mentioned earlier, it's okay to be stern with the external world. That's fine. If that's what it takes for you to heal internally, do it. Do it. Those who understand what's going on with you, those are the ones to keep close. Those are
Yeah.
the ones to bring into your inner circle where you can get more support. Um, and lastly, I hate this term, define your why. I see this term and it kind of drives me nuts. And I think it has its place and its purpose. But when you are deep in burnout, to define your why around dental hygiene can be really difficult because, frankly, when I was in burnout, I didn't care about dental hygiene. I just wanted to feel better. So when you're deep
Mhm.
in burnout, define your why. It doesn't have to be related to dental hygiene or your profession. It could be as simple as, I want to feel like myself again. I want to be
Yeah.
able to go for a walk in the sun for 40 minutes without having to lay down in the middle of the sidewalk and curl into a little ball. I want to be able to function. I want to be able to show up for my friends and for my family. Or ultimately, I just want to show up for myself. I haven't been doing that for 7 years. My why is me. And it's okay that your why is you. You have that permission. Do it. Once we're kind of getting out of burnout, again, tuning into your body and your mind. Where are you at? Can you handle going to a burnout CE? Maybe it's from the comfort of your bed. Maybe it's going out in person. Maybe it's not even going to anything burnout related or CE related. Maybe it's just following some hygiene influencers on Instagram that you find funny. That's what I was like, who is this Jerry? Who's this Jerry RDH guy? He's hilarious. And he was the only hygienist that I followed on my personal page for a couple years because I couldn't be part of the hygiene world. I didn't want to see stuff about the newest technology or scalers or different conferences. That was too much. I wanted out of it. Reignite your passion with hygiene. Start small. Go for
Yeah.
like the little tiny micro habits of just, oh yeah, I like that influencer. You don't have to just submerge yourself in hygiene again. Little steps.
On the lighter side, right? Just hygiene
Yes.
light.
Hygiene light. Yeah, exactly. You don't have to go for hygiene heavy.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. Such great tips and topics. And I think where you really shine or connect is talking about connecting with your body. I just can't stress enough, guys, if you're listening, this is beyond just the self-care. This is truly connecting with your body and trying to be more self-aware of what your body's telling you. And so, Heather, I appreciate all of your knowledge and wisdom on this. Do you want to just tell everybody where to find you? Where can they, social media handle The Relaxed Hygienist, but I know you have some more resources.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at the Relaxed Hygienist. There are underdashes in between each word. The underdash relaxed underdash hygienist. Um, and that's really where I mostly have my content. I will be rolling out a YouTube channel in the near future, which will have more like long form content. Instagram only allows me, 90 seconds to make a video to explain this is how you do alternate nostril breathing, and this is how you do this exercise. I really want what I needed when I was struggling and what I really look for now. I just want guidance. I want someone just to be like, do this. I'm going to count this down for you. And then it's done after like 3 minutes. I don't want to have to think. So the YouTube channel will be more focused on long form content where it's more of like a guided thing with me, whether that's like a guided meditation, guided breathwork techniques, different guided relaxation or recovery techniques as well.
Awesome. Well, we look very forward to that. And I will link her links down in the description box. So you guys check that out. Make sure to check out her resources. And just thank you so much. If you like this, again, share with a hygiene bestie that you think could really use some of this. And I think there's a lot of us out there that could. So we appreciate your time. And we will see everyone listening next Friday on the next episode. So thanks for